"Get your dirty hands off that car, boy." The shout echoed across the upscale Washington, D.C. street as Officer Bradley Townsend stormed toward Dr. Jonathan Hayes, a distinguished black man in an expensive tailored suit who had just stepped out of his luxury sedan. Townsend shoved Hayes hard against the vehicle, forcing his hands onto the hood while curious pedestrians stopped to stare. "Stealing cars in broad daylight now? I should have known better than to try this in my neighborhood." Hayes remained perfectly calm, his voice measured. "Officer, I own this vehicle." Townsend laughed mockingly, twisting Hayes's arm behind his back. "Right, and I'm the FBI director." He forced Hayes face down onto the car. "Hands behind your head now." The growing crowd pulled out phones, recording every moment of the humiliation unfolding before them. Hayes's expensive watch caught the sunlight as his hands were forced into position. Have you ever watched someone's dignity get destroyed based purely on assumptions? What happens next will shatter everything you believe about power and justice in America. 6 hours earlier, Dr. Jonathan Hayes had started his morning like any other. His alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. in his suburban Virginia home. Family photos lined the hallway, his wife Maria, their 2 teenage children, and pictures spanning a distinguished career in federal law enforcement. One frame showed a younger Hayes shaking hands with 3 different FBI directors over the years. The morning news played in the background as he prepared coffee. A reporter discussed recent police reform initiatives. Anonymous federal officials continue pushing for nationwide body camera requirements and enhanced oversight programs. Hayes adjusted his tie, listening intently. He knew more about those initiatives than the reporters could imagine. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Bradley Townsend was already complaining in the precinct locker room. "More federal oversight bullshit," he grumbled to his partner. "These Washington desk jockeys don't know real police work, probably never even been in the field." His locker was decorated with photos from questionable arrests, almost exclusively young black men in handcuffs. A complaint file sat nearby, thick with unresolved allegations. Townsend had been investigated 7 times in 5 years. Each investigation mysteriously stalled or disappeared. "I'm telling you, Martinez," Townsend continued, "these feds think they can tell us how to do our jobs. Wait till one of them tries walking in our shoes." At FBI headquarters, Hayes reviewed briefings in his corner office. Awards and commendations covered the walls, but the nameplates were strategically angled away from the door. His secretary knocked. "Director, your 6 p.m. community engagement is confirmed. The venue is downtown on 5th Street. Hayes nodded, closing a file marked Metropolitan Police Reform Initiative Phase 2. Inside were statistics that would horrify the public. Arrest disparities, complaint patterns, and evidence of systematic misconduct across multiple precincts. His phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Don't work too late tonight. Sarah has a recital tomorrow." Leaving at 5:30, he typed back. "Wouldn't miss it." Townsend spent his afternoon patrol, targeting the same neighborhoods he always did. His radio crackled constantly with reports he ignored, focusing instead on luxury cars driven by black professionals. In 3 hours, he pulled over 4 vehicles. All drivers were black. All were released without tickets, but not before being subjected to extended searches and hostile questioning. His dashboard camera captured everything, but Townsend knew the footage rarely got reviewed. Internal Affairs was overwhelmed, understaffed, and largely ineffective. He felt invincible. At 4:45 p.m., dispatch announced, "All units, federal officials are conducting surprise inspections of body camera compliance. Ensure all equipment is functioning properly." Townsend cursed under his breath. He'd been forgetting to activate his camera for months. Today, he reluctantly switched it on. Hayes left headquarters precisely at 5:30, driving his personal vehicle to avoid attention. The community meeting was part of a listening tour he'd quietly organized. Tonight's topic: building trust between federal law enforcement and local communities. He was scheduled to speak anonymously, identified only as senior federal official. The irony wasn't lost on him. For months, he'd been crafting policies to address exactly the kind of misconduct that plagued departments nationwide. His reforms required body cameras, mandatory reporting, and federal oversight of police internal affairs. Many officers resented the changes without knowing their architect was a black man who'd experienced discrimination firsthand throughout his career. Townsend's radio buzzed again. Unit 47, reports of suspicious activity on 5th Street. Luxury vehicle, possible theft in progress. "I'll handle it," Townsend responded eagerly. 5th Street was his favorite hunting ground. Upscale, where successful black professionals stuck out like sore thumbs, at least in his mind. Hayes parked outside the community center, checking his watch. 15 minutes early, as always. He straightened his tie, grabbed his briefcase, and stepped out of his sedan. From across the street, Townsend's patrol car pulled up. The officer's eyes immediately locked onto Hayes. Expensive car, tailored suit, confident posture, everything that triggered his deepest prejudices and resentments. Townsend had no idea he was about to confront the most powerful law enforcement official in the country. Hayes had no idea his theoretical reforms were about to become brutally personal. The stage was set. Two men representing opposite sides of American justice were about to collide in a confrontation that would change everything. The FBI field office buzzed with intense activity as Director Hayes established a comprehensive task force within hours of his release. Agent Morrison pulled up digital files on multiple monitors while forensic specialists examined the planted evidence under microscopes. The scale of the investigation was unprecedented. A sitting FBI director had been the victim of police misconduct, creating a federal case with massive implications that would ripple through law enforcement nationwide. "Director, we've completed the preliminary evidence analysis," Agent Rodriguez reported, not to be confused with the police officer. The substance Townsend planted was powdered sugar mixed with baking soda. Street value approximately $50. But the federal charges he'll face carry 25 years to life in federal prison. Hayes nodded grimly, reviewing body camera footage on his laptop. The video was damning. 12 different angles showing Townsend's evidence planting, his racist language, and his complete disregard for proper procedure. Every frame told the story of systematic abuse of power. "What about his arrest history?" "I want everything." "That's where it gets deeply disturbing, sir," Morrison replied, pulling up database records that filled 3 large monitors. "Townsend has made 847 arrests in 5 years. 723 of them were black males between ages 18 and 55. That's an 85.4% rate in a district that's only 31% black population. The statistical improbability alone suggests targeting," Hayes concluded, his analytical mind processing the numbers. "Exactly. And here's the smoking gun. 89% of his drug possession charges were later dismissed or reduced due to procedural issues, lack of evidence, or prosecutorial concerns about case integrity." Hayes felt his jaw tighten as the implications sank in, meaning the evidence was questionable or manufactured from the start. Hayes closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of systematic injustice. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a calculated pattern of harassment and abuse that had destroyed trust in law enforcement throughout entire communities. "Schedule a recorded interview with Townsend. I want to conduct it personally." "Sir, is that legally advisable? You're the primary victim in this case," defense attorneys could argue. "That's exactly why I need to do it, Sarah. The victims in his other cases never got the chance to confront their abuser directly. They never got to look him in the eye and demand answers. Someone needs to speak for them. And as the highest-ranking law enforcement official in this country, that responsibility falls to me." 3 days later, Hayes sat across from Townsend in a sterile interview room at the federal building. The former officer looked like he'd aged 15 years. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he signed waiver forms, declining legal representation for the recorded interview. His uniform had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit, a visible symbol of his fall from authority to criminal defendant. "State your full name and former occupation for the record," Hayes began, his voice professionally neutral, but carrying unmistakable authority. "Bradley James Townsend, former police officer, 5th Precinct, Metropolitan Police Department." His voice was barely audible, broken. "Mr. Townsend, do you understand why you're here today?" "Because I arrested you without knowing who you were." Hayes leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Townsend's face. "No. You're here because you systematically violated the civil rights of American citizens over a period of years. My federal position is completely irrelevant to these charges. You would have done the same thing to a janitor, a teacher, a student, or an unemployed person. Isn't that correct? You meant black people. You saw my skin color and made every assumption that followed from that single observation. My education level, my criminal history, my right to drive an expensive car, my right to exist in that neighborhood, my right to be treated with basic human dignity, all determined by racial prejudice." The interview continued for 3 more grueling hours. Hayes methodically walked through case after case, extracting admissions that painted a picture of systematic misconduct spanning 5 years and affecting dozens of families. Townsend's defense crumbled under the weight of overwhelming evidence, and Hayes's relentless, methodical questioning that leveraged decades of investigative experience. When the interview finally concluded, Hayes stood and straightened his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "Mr. Townsend, your actions didn't just harm individual victims. You systematically undermined public trust in law enforcement, corrupted the justice system at its foundation, and violated the oath you swore to uphold when you became a police officer. The federal government will prosecute you to the fullest extent of federal law." As Hayes reached the door, Townsend called out desperately, his voice cracking with panic. "What if I cooperate fully? What if I help identify other cases, other officers who might be engaged in similar practices?" Hayes turned back slowly, his expression unchanged. "Cooperation with ongoing federal investigations might influence sentencing recommendations from the prosecutor's office. But understand this clearly, Mr. Townsend. Your cooperation doesn't erase the lives you've damaged, the families you've torn apart, or the institutional trust you've systematically destroyed. Justice delayed is still justice. It's just finally caught up with you."